Hi, this is Janos, this is Real World Audio, and my voice sounds really echoey because we are in my garage looking at my old license plate. And that's because it's next to the circuit breaker panel, the fuse box. So why am I showing this? And I'm showing it because lately I have received a lot of questions to show my system, and previously in the past years I have made quite a handful of videos about parts of my system, but I never made a full video or a full series showing my system as a whole, just parts of it. So now I got the request to show both my room and my system, and I'm doing a little bit more than that. I'm also showing the electricity, the room, and the system, because all of these are very key to a stereo system. And I'm starting with the electricity because this is where a stereo system starts, at the place where you receive the juice, receive the power, because what you are listening to is the electricity coming from here, and this is your absolute bottleneck for your stereo. And in most cases, if you already have a good to decent sound system, you have spent maybe years, maybe 10 years tweaking it, and you have spent a lot of money, time and effort on it, then actually when you are thinking about the next step to upgrade, this is your next step. And whatever money you are thinking about, whatever choice you are thinking about, you will do much better if you upgrade your panel and take care of the electricity that goes to your sound system. And why is that? Because in most homes, at least here in the United States, but that's true everywhere else in the world, when you live in a home, in a house, or rent a place, then the circuit breaker panel that's in your house, it's going to be probably the one that the house was built with. And it's just as old as your home, maybe 10, 20, 40, 50, 60 years old, and all the parts in it probably corroded to near oblivion. The breakers in it with connections really poorly tightened, wires that run in your wall, they are probably very much corroded, with the insulation on it barely hanging on. And for example, when we got this place, and after we moved in, we had a panel here that was about this size. That was the whole thing. And now we have, look at that, this gigantic panel, and the old one was literally this size, like almost 10 times smaller than this current panel that we have. And so that was the first thing that I did, to change that panel, which had just maybe like a dozen breakers in it, most of them double tapped, so it means like two wires were going into one connection, and that's a giant, huge no. It's a big safety and fire hazard. And if you think that I'm just talking nonsense or talking in vain and who cares, everyone knows, we are all safe, whatever, just think about it, that in the United States alone, I think about 100,000 homes burn down every year because of electricity related fire. And most of that starts with the fuse box. So that's why I strongly urge everyone to just have a look at your panel, And of course, don't do that look by yourself. Have an electrician come out and ask them to just have a look at the panel to establish how is it doing, and whether you need a new one or not. And I can say from experience, if your home is at least 20 years old or older, then you will do greatly if you upgrade your panel to a new one. It will be a monstrous improvement. So for me, when I changed my 40+ year old panel to this one, and with those few number of fuses, circuit breakers, change them to all of these 32 breakers, and as you see, I filled up the panel completely, and that's because I installed a bunch of extra lines to have plenty of outlets and plenty of lights everywhere, and for all the utilities appliances that now we have in the 2020s versus in the 1970s, when people needed a hairdryer and a stove, and that was it basically. So getting now a little bit more focused on stereo, because I promised that it's going to be a tour of my system. But yes, this is where it starts. Monstrous huge panel, and when I installed it, the change was so drastic. It was a night and day scenario, and it was not just noticeable with stereo. Even the lights were almost seemed as if they are twice as bright. It's as if I changed the light bulbs to twice as strong wattage. It was absolutely monstrous, the improvement that the new panel brought on. And now going to the stereo, you see I have a bunch of breakers with blue dots on them, and you guessed that correctly. All of the ones with blue dots are dedicated stereo breakers for the stereo, and they are blue because they are cryogenically treated. And no, I didn't pay any money for cryogenic treatment. I did the treatment myself. So basically, you see here, I've also put numbers on them and put labels to identify the breakers. So this is my stereo line number 1, number 4, 2, 3, and that's the one that's dedicated to the Blu-ray player and the projector. Upstairs bedroom has a dedicated line, and the upstairs guest room has also its own separate dedicated line for audio. So that's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 dedicated lines for audio and video. And what difference did that make? It made a monstrous difference. And if you think that the difference is all going on the easy road, it's not. Because one thing I noticed is that the good thing was that there was an absolutely monstrous transformation in the power delivery of the system. The black levels were just gigantically improved, so like the grayness from the sound disappeared. But same thing for the picture. Both TV screen, computer monitor and projector, the contrast level and the black and white levels, they just jumped through the roof after this installation. And what I also noticed is that the noise, the electrical noise that the neighbors were making, it came through better as well. So while the panel gives you a monstrous improvement, it also lets you hear all the junk that your neighbors are polluting the circuit, the grid with, better than before. And why is that? That's because when you have a poor panel and you have worn out lines running AC to your system. Those worn out lines have wire with aged insulation that's also creating its own noise. So that's why an old electrical system feeding your stereo will sound gray, dull, and lack of low level information, because there's a lot of noise, lot of hash going through. And when that's not anymore, one thing you notice is that there's a tremendous improvement in dynamics, both high level and low level. And at the low level, because you can hear into those low levels, you can also hear that noise that's coming from the neighbor that was previously hidden by the problems on your panel. But as you will notice that those noises do not come constantly from the neighbors. You will be acutely aware when they start and will be acutely aware when they stop. So basically that's it. This is what I wanted to share about the supply for my system. And as you see, they are not organized perfectly in order. You see that the breakers for the main system, they are separated by one. So there's line number 1, something else, number 4, something else, number 2, something else, number 3. So those 4 lines which feed my main system, main audio system, are all displaced by 1. And that's because every second fuse that you see, they are at the same polarity. So these guys are the same polarity here. And the neighbors, they are opposite polarity. So it means that here, that's where the wires are connected to the breaker on the inside. Between this and that, if you put a voltmeter there, there's 240 volts difference. And if you put the meter to these 2 wires, there's 0 volt difference between them. That's what it means that the breakers are in phase or out of phase. And if you have multiple AC outlets feeding your system, this is how you should set it up, that they are giving the same phase AC to your system. And that's how you can get away with feeding your system from multiple breakers. The common mistake that people make is that they have adjacent fuses, and let's say this one feeds your amplifier and this one feeds your DAC, and then there's 240 volts difference between them, and that will create a noise situation between the two, and it will, that monstrous big voltage difference between the two will appear as a stress in the sound. And that's why people end up recommending using a single breaker and feeding everything from that. And that's what I recommend for you as well. However, when you build your own panel, or if better, have an electrician build it for you, build it this way, that have them on the same polarity, and now you can feed your system from there. And now when you have a proper panel, wires properly tightened, that means that the ground potential will be very close to each of them. And also here, as you see, all of these are 20 amp breakers. So no 15 amp breaker for my system here. Everything is 20 amps. Outlets in the wall, they are 20 amps as well. And the wire that carries the electricity, it's not gauge 12, which is rated for 20 amps, but it's gauge 10, which is rated for 25 amps. So basically, I have a very clear, very direct, very powerful path feeding my stereo system. And also going to the nitty-gritty, I am using the 4 wire Romex cables, and I'm not using the black wire, I'm using the run for the hot. And that's because in the black wire to get the color, they are adding carbon, and that carbon creates a low level noise. So if you install electricity in your system, avoid black wire for stereo. And the red one, that's also up to code, so you can use it in the United States for hot wire. You just need to purchase wire that has red wire in it. So thank you for tuning in, and this was part 0, and I started it because this is the absolute ground for your system, and this is where you need to start if you take building your system seriously. And if you are unhappy with the sound, you have probably lack of a proper panel and proper breakers, proper AC outlets, proper wiring in the wall. Probably that's a key issue for any unhappiness. So thank you for tuning in. Have an awesome day. Bye bye. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so.